Well, good morning, everybody. I would now like to call to order the meeting of the directors of the Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation for Monday, March 11, 2019. I'd like to note for the record that this meeting is being webcast. Directors have received the relevant written materials in advance of today's meeting and are free to ask any questions at that time. While we're on the subject of directors, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome our newest members to the board, Ms. Shakora Donovan and Mr. Mike Bogle, both of whom were recommended to serve by Governor Cuomo, and I'm certain that they will be invaluable assets to the corporation as we continue to move forward in Western New York, and especially the emphasis on our waterfront. So welcome, and please feel free to ask any questions at any time, and if there's any question, there's a lot that's going on. Stop us if we move too quickly. Consistent with the policy of our parent corporation, we welcome public comment on the item following agenda. After each item is presented and any comments are received from directors, we will allow members of the public to provide comments. All comments should be limited to 2 minutes and should only address the item that is under consideration. Before we begin with the meeting, I would like to ask the directors whether anyone has any potential conflict of interest with respect to any items in today's agenda.
None.
Hearing none, we will proceed. And the first item on the agenda, I would like to ask Chanel Manigan to present the item related to the appointment of the president of the corporation. Good morning, Chanel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to the Board of Directors. As you know, the office of President to the Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation is currently vacant. So, to ensure that the corporation has a principal officer who can execute all required documentation and who otherwise fulfills the duties and responsibilities of the office of President, it is recommended that Stephen Rinaldi be appointed President of the Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation. Mr. Rinaldi has been an ECHDC employee since 2008. He's a professional engineer, and he also has experience in urban planning, design, and economic development. He's served as Vice President of Development for ECHDC since August of last year. He's had day-to-day oversight and management of all projects and initiatives within the corporation's 450 acres of waterfront property. Mr. Rinaldi has also been working to advance other initiatives of this Western New York regional office and of USA Niagara Development Corporation, ESD's subsidiary. His major accomplishments with the corporation include reconstruction of the historically aligned canals at Canal Side, replicating the western terminus of the Erie Canal, the Explore More Children's Museum, the Ohio Street Reconstruction Project, and the first phase of the Outer Harbor redevelopment, including a bike park, event lawn, trails extension, and habitat enhancements. Mr. Rinaldi is currently managing the Outer Harbor capital planning phase, including the first Buffalo River Marina and Terminal B sites, the redevelopment of the South Odd Block, and the design of the Longshed Building and replica packet boat project. Mr. Rinaldi has managed the Canalside Cultural Committee, the Canalside Design Committee, and is a member of New York State's Smart Growth Committee. At this time, the directors are requested to approve the appointment of Stephen Rinaldi as President of the Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation, and to confirm that he is an officer and President of the corporation within the meaning of the New York State Urban Development Corporation Act and the corporation's bylaws, including the indemnification provisions thereof. Based on the foregoing, it's my pleasure to recommend approval of the requested actions.
Chanel, thank you. Any questions or comments from the directors? There better not be. Teasing. Any questions or comments from the public? Hearing none, all in favor, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved, seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you so much. Now, now your work starts.
I can put, right, I'll put this up.
It's right.
There we go.
The approval of the operating budget. Mr. Rennell.
Before I start, I do just want to say a quick thank you to the board for this. It's truly an honor to have the opportunity to lead the Buffalo waterfront and be a part of the city's rebirth. A few people in the room that were here at my interview back in 2008, and you know, I came prepared, I guess. I had been following the waterfront forever as a kid. I clipped out Buffalo News stories, Mike, that you were probably involved with great big renderings and plans of the future and a few silver bullet ideas to go with that. And so I've been following this forever. I was thrilled to have a chance to come on board in 2008. And again, I thank you. I want to thank the governor for the opportunity as well and his continued focus on Western New York. Howard Zemsky and his leadership here at Empire State Development, as well as Robert, who I've gotten to know over the last few years, and the rest of the board. And I just, you know, I want to end on saying that, you know, selecting me for this is I think, really, it says a lot about the corporation itself and the staff on board. You know, I think promoting within means that you're relatively happy with the progress that we've made. And I want to recognize the whole team, frankly, from Sam Matezik and Joe Clark, Chris Catanzaro, Kevin Smith, and Lou Rizik, as well as the recently retired Mark Smith, and two of our new hires, Mark Wendell and Christine Kemis. I know the whole team looks forward to coming every day, and I know I do, and I look forward to working with everybody for quite some time. So thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Congrats.
And now on to business. Again, yes, the first item of today is the fiscal year 2019-2020 operating and capital budget proposals. New York State finance law requires that prior to the commencement of April 1st each year, the board adopt an annual operating and capital budget. This year's operating budget summary is as follows. We have a total of $1,039,188 in personal services, which are generally salaries, fringe benefits for up to 9 employees, as well as a total of $228,500 in non-personal services. These are things like office occupancy insurance, internal things. This represents approximately just slightly under a 3% increase from last year's operating budget, and does hold open a position, as I mentioned a minute ago. Mark Smith has retired, so we currently have 8 employees on staff, but this would hold open Vice President of Construction position, a 9th position for us. On the capital budget side, and again, this is completely separate from our operating budget, these will be capital projects that will ultimately be individually approved by this board under separate actions. So we're just setting aside a total amount today, a capital budget of $40,754,197. And just in general, this funding is going to go to finishing up the Explore and More Museum. That's on the South Block, remainder of the South Odd Block with the Sinatra development, the Carousel project, the upcoming Long Shed, as well as design for things like the North Odd Block, which we'll talk about in a minute, and then on to Canal Side programming, events, utilities, things like that. Overall, the capital budget is slightly down from last year. This budget represents about a 6.3% decrease. And again, that's because we're wrapping up a few projects. We're winding down the Children's Museum. We're winding down on the bike park. And we're going to be heavy into design this year before we spend some money again next year on the Outer Harbor and hopefully the North Odd Block. Again, funding for the capital budget is consistent with existing board actions and will consist of both existing and anticipated funds from the New York Power Authority, the New York State Budget Appropriations, and the Federal Highway Administration. No ECHDC corporate funds are included in the capital budget. So with that, based on the foregoing, I request to ratify and approve the corporation's proposed fiscal year 2019-2020 operating budget in the amount of $1,267,688 and the capital budget in the amount of $40,504,999. $754,197.
Thank you. Any questions from any of the directors? Michael?
In the operating budget, Steve, I noticed we're going from 8 to 9 in the staffing and the headcount. Is that filling a vacancy, or are we adding staff?
That's right now. We're going to hold that position open. Again, we're holding the vice president of construction position open. We haven't made a decision with kind of what's coming in this next fiscal year if we need to fill it currently.
Okay. In the non-personnel services category, most of the changes look, relatively minor, but there's a $30,000 hike in repairs and maintenance. Is that aging of the facility, or is there a specific in there?
Yeah, actually, sure. On the repairs, maintenance, property management, outside services, we are going up about $30,000. We actually are going to invest this year in a full plan room. So the last 10 years have been fantastic here with a lot of capital projects. But now we need a space where we can gather all those as-built and books and manuals and keep track of running a small campus, basically. So that's going to allow us to bring a lot of our plans electronic and pull together a plan room with some additional equipment.
That's a really good idea. I am curious why insurance is dropping some $16,000. Insurance companies generally don't do that.
Yeah, I know. It's a good deal for us there. Actually, we've just been tracking that more closely. I feel like we've sort of held around $50,000, $55,000 in the last few years, but we've been coming well under that. So I think we just felt it was appropriate. We're probably still on the conservative side there.
Thank you. Looks like an overall good job.
Any other questions, comments from the media? Any questions or comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Item number 3, Steve, which is the Exploring-More Museum exterior signage. Thank you, Robert.
As I think almost everyone on the board, and hopefully the new folks, are well aware that we are very close to opening the Children's Museum at Canal Side. And back about 2 years ago in February of 17, the board did adopt the Canal Side Design Review Committee's recommendation for the core and shell building. However, at that time, the museum's exterior signage was not included in that recommendation. They were still working on it. Again, overall, we've got a very historic-looking building, something that fits the canal era and works great on the canals themselves. But Exploring-More certainly wanted to add their signage over the top to enhance the facility, make it look like a children's museum, and explain all the various offerings, the retail store, the restaurant inside, and make sure everybody was aware of those. So the overall package that we're talking about today includes 3-dimensional Exploring-More signs. They look like their logo. They include a logo sign on all 4 facades, and also a sculptural. Oh yeah, I'm referring to Exhibit A, but maybe is it possible that we can flip this over to get a PDF up on the screen? Cool. Maybe not. I'll do it. Can I switch that over, Debbie? I'm going to refer to the exhibit.
Yeah, because I think then that will be on the webcast, so that would be nice for that to be recorded, yes.
Is it possible, though, to get it up on the main screen? Right now our screen's blanked out. I don't know if you are controlling that.
No, we actually see you.
All right. Well, I'll get someone in here in a second. If I can just again refer to Exhibit A, this is the full package that was provided to us from the museum. I'll just again briefly highlight the different elements so we can get that image up on the screen. As I said, there'll be logo signs on each facade so that everyone's clear it is Exploring-More Children's Museum. They will also be including the official new name, the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Children's Museum, in proximity to 3 of these logos, mainly over the front doors as you enter. There will also be laser-cut lettering added along the canopies to identify Towpath Restaurant, first floor retail store. And then there are some enhancements. I refer to them as window clings, but obviously they're more significant than that. They do fill a number of the windows with brightly colored graphics, and then they have included some branded words to go on the brick surfaces themselves. And lastly, but not least at all, there is a large tricycle sculpture that will be located on the roof. And this is a really nice touch to bring both a children's toy, to part of the future branding of the museum, but it also is a nod to the history, because back in the 1800s, the George N. Pierce Company manufactured bicycles just down the street from here, and that, of course, led to the Pierce Arrow Car Company. So again, the package itself was reviewed, approved, or the building was. This package, too, was reviewed by the DRC, and then that was sent over to the city for approval, which they did, and so we're coming back to you guys for the final approval. So again, upon review and consideration of DRC's recommendation, as well as Planning Department, the ECHDC staff finds that the signage is consistent. Based upon this, the directors are requested to, one, based on the recommendations, again, of the Design Review Committee and the city, find that the project is consistent with the guidelines established by the corporation as part of the GPP for the canal side land use improvement project without modification, and two, take all related actions.
Any questions from any directors?
I have a few comments. I like a lot of what has been proposed with the signage, but I feel that there's not enough of the strength of the reference to historic lettering. And the other proposals, I don't feel like there's enough of a sense of playfulness with the words that are going across the building. So these are the comments that I would like to make. I think there, again, is a lot that has been done that is great, but these that I bring up, I just feel like they look flat. And I think that we've got to open really strong. And graphics and signage they're not the last detail. They're really one of the most important details that have a sense of identity and the sense of creativity and playfulness that is going to be part of this museum.
Any comments to that, Steve?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and I apologize again, we were hoping to have this on the screen. I think what Connie's referring to in here, this is about page 18 of your package. It's called the East Side Lloyd 9 Elements. And this is just an image of the east side of the building, but you can see a number of the words that relate to their brand moving forward applied to the brick surface. And you're saying that you'd like us to take another look at how they're handling that.
I really would.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Mike?
I agree with Connie on the need to do history and heritage evocation in this bill. Signage in the 19th century served a very different function than this signage does, so I think the design committee's approach to it, while it could be amped up, which I think is what you're getting at.
Exactly.
Signs in the 19th century were strictly identification signs, and they were mostly window painting and things like that. This, I think, strikes a nice balance. I'll defer to anybody else who has more experience with 15-foot tricycles, but I was curious as to to be primarily visible from the skyway or primarily visible from the light itself?
I think it's primarily visible from the skyway, and then as you approach, I think once you get down onto the towpath, I don't think you'll actually see it up on the roof any longer. You'll be too close. But certainly, as you approach the different streets, you'll be able to see that up on top. Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments? Any questions or comments from the public?
Before we, again, if you don't mind, before we vote, if I could just offer, we could, if you move forward with the recommendation to approve these, but with that one exception, that we hold back on the design enhancement lettering currently right now. We'll pull that out of this recommendation so we can work on it a little bit further and bring it back to you before we approve that.
Connie?
I think that it would be two things, the lettering as well as the visuals in the windows.
The windows,
I
okay.
don't think you can look at one without the other. It's got to be
All right.
done together.
So can we move ahead with those?
I would like to, because, you know, we're,
You
again,
okay
we're...
to move ahead with
With-
that
Yes, with that condition.
announcement?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so with that, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Steve, we are now to the New York State, New York Power Authority Environmental Justice.
Again, related to the Children's Museum, we've obviously been working on the budget and trying all we can do to fill that out, and they've been trying to fundraise, and we've been trying to support them for a while. When we authorized the development agreement with the museum, and the board did that back in 2015, and then we executed it back in 16, one of the sections basically stated that any fundraising that was done that had to come to ECHDC, because we're the owner of the building, would be passed back through to the museum. The agreement actually at the time had contemplated this potential New York Power Authority environmental justice grant. We were successful in obtaining that for $300,000. In fact, it was just awarded to us in December of 18. So in a nutshell, we're asking the board to accept that funding and then pass it back along to the museum in accordance with our earlier agreements. So directors are requesting, 1, to authorize ECHDC to accept the New York State Power Authority Environmental Justice Grant in the amount of $300,000, and 2, to authorize ECHDC to disperse the funds in the amount of $300,000 to Explore More Children's Museum to be applied to Explore More's contribution towards the construction of the core shell of the Children's Museum at Canalside, and 3, to take all related actions. And just to just real brief, to clarify what that is for, the funding is specifically used for energy enhancements. So the building is LEED certified. With the additional funding and the focus on trying to minimize long-term utility bills for them, and we were actually able to better, if you will, the energy code compliance by roughly 10% on this building. And that's going to include things like high-efficiency boilers, variable speed pumping, central station variable air volume, air handling units, additional variable speeds, and enhanced control strategies. So we're really pleased to say that $300,000 is going to offset the capital cost and reduce long-term operating costs.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from any director? Any questions or comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Next up is the Queen City Bike Ferry. Steve?
Yes, the Queen City Bike Ferry. We've been working on getting access back and forth across the Buffalo River for quite some time. And the vision actually for this project came all the way back in 2010 when we had a number of working committees on the waterfront. 43 proposals were received back then, including one from the Buffalo Sailing Adventure, who became the Queen City Ferry Company, who's currently the Queen City Bike Ferry, Inc. At the time, back in 2010, it received a strong the proposal received a strong recommendation to be funded for a short-term access goal to connect the inner and outer harbor, and we implemented that, and what started out a bit as a waterfront attraction/ride really has grown into a true ferry service to get people back and forth across the river. And so I'm going to jump here. So back in around 2014, when we knew we would be upgrading the bike ferry landing on the outer harbor, it's actually when we moved to the current boat, which allows bikes to get on board, and the Board of Directors in September 15th of 2014 approved a 4-year contract with the Queen City Bike Ferry to operate the service. At the time the board approved that 4-year contract, it also included 2 3-year options, to operate. The contract amount then was $852,300, and again, that was just to fund the initial 4 years from December of 14 through September of 18. Since we've changed that service to include bikes, the numbers have been off the chart. We went from about 5,000 riders a year on the original to 55,000 right out of the gate. And so, on average over the last 4 years, we've had 40,000 pedestrians and bicyclists ride it. It operates as it did back then all the way through today, Memorial Day to Labor Day. We've kept it at $1 a ride each way, so it's very economical for people to get on. And we've tried to enhance it with, ticket kiosks and some things over the last couple of years to amp it up. Overall, it's been, I think, a real fiscal value, if you will, in those first 4 years. To be honest, we have actually raised $172,480 in revenue through those tickets and some minor sponsorship to offset the actual cost of operation. So we've been thrilled with the service, thrilled with the operator, and what we're really asking today is to continue that for another 3 years. The extension that we're talking about comes at an additional cost of $269,450, so that with the original contract and the amendment, we'd be slightly over $1 million to date. The funding source will continue to be the New York State Power Authority, the relicensing agreement. And so with that, I would like to request that, 1, we authorize the operations fee with the Queen City Bike Ferry in an amount of $269,450, and to authorize the taking of all actions related to the foregoing.
Any questions or comments from directors? McCown.
Yeah, so Steve, what is the basis for keeping the fee at $1 going forward?
I think, I think we find that we're able to get everybody have an opportunity to get across. It's meant to be more of a public transportation piece. We'd certainly consider increasing that over time, but I think what we're finding too, the first couple years, while we did around 55,000, the years 3 and year 4 are starting to trail off a little bit more. That's why we're averaging only around 40 for that period. So I'm not sure increasing it right now would be the right way to go. But certainly, in the end, to help offset the expenses, that's one way to increase revenue.
Any other questions or comments? Connie.
Have you contemplated offering something like a season's pass?
It's a great question.
I think you can't you get it online? I thought there was a season pass for the bike fair.
I don't believe that's the case. Looking at Chris. That's a slight, yeah, I don't believe we've done that. The ticket kiosk may allow us to have some more options like that.
Okay.
Ultimately, we can buy multiple tickets now and that round ticket, but that's something to consider. The season's pass.
Any other questions or comments? Any questions or comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
And seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Steve, item number 6, which is the Canal Side Public Space Management.
Right. Just need to authorize a management fee and capital budget for years 3, 4, and 5 to our BR guest contract. Back in January of 17, the board authorized ECHDC to enter into a 5-year agreement with BR Guest to provide public management services at Canal Side. The board approved at that time a management fee for years 1 and year 2 in an amount not to exceed $2.9 million. That included both the management fee at $1.3 million a year, as well as a capital budget of $100,000 per year and then a contingency of 100. So that's how we had the original 2.9. At the time, we knew there were a number of projects coming forward at Canal Side. We didn't completely have the timeline nailed down or the impact to the site. And so that's why we really only asked to move forward with funding for those first 2 years. Clear, those are things we're talking about today and in the future, the Long Shed, the Carousel, North Aud Block, even the Children's Museum, and the South Aud Block, the Heritage Point development. All those things significantly affect how the site is going to operate. And now that we have timelines for those and we have a better understanding, we're back to the board to talk about years 3, 4, and 5. So overall, the scope of work for BRG will remain the same: operations and maintenance, programming, event management, marketing, sponsorship, food and beverage management, as well as the financial management. But we are talking to them about changing the role for the facilities management to include the Children's Museum and the Long Shed building as they come online. So even though we're adding some new buildings, changing some stuff, we've worked very closely with the team on trying to keep that fee at the same point as it was originally. One of the things I do want to point out specifically on page 3 is after these first 2 years, the contract is set up to share in revenue once we see revenue coming back in. And while we're not completely through this year just yet, it is estimated that net operating income and revenue share from the first 2 years of the contract will be approximately $77,400 coming back into the pot, if you will. So with that, again, the budget for the next 3 years out, for years 3, 4, and 5, we're holding the management fee, even with those changes in the additional building management. We're holding the management fee to $1.3 million a year, as it has been. For a capital budget, we'd like to increase that to $150,000 annually, and also include a contingency of $150,000. So we're talking about an increase in the contract by $4.5 million for a total of $7.4 million. So with that, the directors are requested to authorize ECHCC to commit funds to the BRG management fee and capital budget for years 3, 4, and 5 of the management agreement in an amount not to exceed $4.5 million, and to take all related actions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from any director? Connie?
To date, for years 1 and 2, there's a revenue share of approximately $7.4. What do you anticipate for years 3, 4, and 5, the revenue share?
The first year of the contract, there was a lot of startup costs, and there was a lot to learn out on the site. We also didn't have maybe the greatest year when it came to concerts with some weather and some things. So the first year there were actually operating losses, whereas they moved into the second year, they were able to get a lot more efficient. We had a much better concert season, and so that's really where we're seeing the revenue share come. I'm not exactly sure, how to predict that, just because there is so much risk inherent in the concerts and some other things. But certainly, I think we're on the right track to continue to see revenue sharing in years 3, 4, and 5. I'm not exactly sure what that amount will be.
Okay. Thank you.
Mike?
Just in background, as a waterfront stakeholder who's dealt with Canal Side on a couple of, just wanted to note that this contractor is much more responsive and a lot easier to work with than the previous contractor we had at Canal Side. So, I'm very much pleased with the way that they have been operating that site.
Right. Anything else? Any questions or comments from the public? You smiling over there, Matt? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Item number 7, which is the Canal Side Public Space Office Management Fee and Capital Work Take with it. We did that one. We did that one. I'm sorry. North Odd Block.
There we go.
I'm sorry.
You got it. North Odd Block Development, Infrastructure Design Services. This is for authorization to enter into a consultant agreement for architectural and engineering services. Again, this goes back to earlier this summer when the governor made a commitment to spending $10 million on the North Odd Block and cleaning up the hole that we've had out there for quite some time. This is really the last unplanned section of Canal Side, and so authorizing the scope of work really will help us figure out what that is going to be so we can complete the design and move forward with that. So basically, this is preliminary architecture and engineering, programmatic elements to be incorporated, things like the design of the missing historic street right-of-ways. This will look at creating a platform structure or subsurface parking on that North Odd Block. This will also look at what that is going to do to support future development parcels on that site. Again, we're looking to accommodate mixed-use development parcels and optimize the subdivision of the North Odd Block for a much more progressive infill strategy. We'll continue to use the Canal Side design guidelines, and the scope of work includes public and stakeholder engagement throughout the concept and schematic phases. The RFP, when we went out, was looking to bring a team on that can help us start, right? Do concept, do schematic, figure out what we want. We bring that back to the board, and once that direction is approved, the consultant team will negotiate for the remaining, finishing up the design to take that out to construction and then manage construction. So what we're talking about today, though, is really only moving forward those 2 early steps. We put the North Odd Block RFP out on the street back on December 5th of 2018. We advertised that in the contract reporter. In January of this year, we received 7 proposals, all consisting of consultant teams with a number of members on each one of those teams. The proposals were reviewed and scored by both ECHDC as well as ESD staff. And in fact, the entire procurement process and how we score that and what we're looking for was all included in the RFP. We included all the skill sets we're looking for, as well as how we were going to score those proposals so that everybody was well aware. The final rankings by the selection committee are listed there on page 4 with T.Y. Lin International coming out on top of that process. T.Y. Lin is a full-service, multidisciplinary engineering firm with over 60 years of experience in successful infrastructure development, including the design of multifunctional public landscapes and urban buildings. Their team also includes Pleasant Places, Happy People, Highland Planning, Brandina Engineering and Land Surveying, Ramtech, McMahon and Mann, Sienna Environmental, Pine Woods, and Trophy Point. This team is well suited for the project, having been involved with urban development and infrastructure projects both here in Buffalo and the Rochester area. And again, to add to that experience, they included Pleasant People, Happy Places, a renowned architectural firm that focuses on waterfront development, and then also brought on Highland Planning to make sure we maximize the engagement process with the public and our stakeholders. The team will be directed by Principal in Charge Bob Radley and Project Manager Herb Hunter. And as I said, we're looking to hire this team for the full project, but at this time we're just asking the board to move forward with Task 1, the project scoping and concept design, as well as Task 2, the schematic design, which you get to a preliminary of 30% design. Once we have a preferred concept plan and a construction budget, we'll bring that back to the board for acceptance, and we'll move into, again, as I said earlier, negotiating final scope and work and fees to finish up the project. We're hoping to start in May of this year and be wrapped up by the end of August so that we can begin later this year on final design. The consultant agreement will cover fees and expenses for this 4-month period. The contract amount with the T.Y. Lin team to complete the above scope of work shall not exceed $595,316, which does include a $100,000 contingency. Funding source shall be the New York Power Authority Industrial Incentive. I do want to point out on page 7 that the team is well aware of the MWB goals of 15% MBE, 15% W, and 3% SDVOB. In tasks 1 and 2, they are slightly below that goal. They're currently at 25.7%. However, they do project upon completion of the entire project that they will be well over at around 46%. So I did want to point that out. And ESD staff has determined that the action constitutes a Type 2 action as defined by New York State Seeker Act and the implementing regulations of the Department of Environmental Conservation. No further environmental review is required at this time. And with that, the directors are required to, 1, make a determination of responsibility with respect to the proposed consultant, 2, authorize the corporation to enter into a contract with T.Y. Lin for an amount not to exceed $495,316, again, including reimbursables and the contingency, plus the $100,000 contingency for a total contract amount of $595,316. And finally, 3, to take all related actions.
Any questions from any director? McCall.
Yeah, Steve, could you just clarify on the contract's term, the term of the contract?
The term here will begin after it's signed, probably in May of 19, and we're hoping to complete this phase in August of 2019. However, on the first page, it refers out to 2022, which is what we would expect the overall contract to take place once we move into tests 3 through 7, I believe it is. So the short term would be about a 4-month contract.
Okay. Anything else, Tom?
Yeah, this isn't, it's related to this, but not specific, coming from the executive and our deputy county executive. We've been looking at a lot of conflict of interest policy and those kind of things, and they've looked at it in relation to this stuff that's come out, and are basically offering, and I know, Steve, you've had discussions with Maria on this, and she just asked me to bring this forward to the board, that we've got a pretty good conflict of interest policy and procedure that we follow when it has to do with these things, to make sure that we've covered ourselves, and just asking that that Steve and legal counsel consider what we've done and look at what we're doing that this group's doing as a board to address conflict of interest, just so that when things go out and things get approved, it's clear who sat in, who didn't, so that we're just, as a board, we're covering ourselves a little better than our administration feels this group is right now.
Sure. Do you want to?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I've got a few copies of it.
Sure.
So, for everybody to look at. But it basically develops a procedure where the project manager that's responsible for reviewing, the documents under consideration, asks everybody else to fill this out in relation to that project, make sure nobody has a conflict and that they state those, and then that determination is made before anybody is even given an opportunity to look at things. That's all.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Connie?
Tom, how long have you been utilizing this form?
Within the last, I think we just began to develop the beginning of last year.
Okay.
We've been using it for about a year now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
So
Moved to second, and all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Item number 8 is the last item on the agenda today, and that is the operator agreement for the first Buffalo River Marina. Steve.
Thank you, Robert. This is to authorize us to enter into an agreement for marina operations, again, for the first Buffalo River Marina at 32 Furman. On September 12, 2016, the Board of Directors approved the acquisition of 32 Furman Boulevard, which is approximately a 13-acre property located at the north end of the Outer Harbor. We purchased this from the Power Authority and took over a 115-slip boat marina, includes outdoor storage for a number of boats, more than the 115, a boat launch pad, administration building, space for 150 trailers for parking, as well as a boat repair building. We have worked for the past 2 years with the marina operator there, as well as the staff on the site to ensure continuity when we took it over. And the operator we had out there, their contract was up, so we put this back out for an RFP. In January of 16 of this year, we actually issued an RFP in the contract reporter, again seeking proposals from qualified operators for the opportunity to manage the marina. On February 7th of 2019, we received 2 proposals, each of which met the standard for continued review. They were from Brand on First Buffalo River Marina and Dales Marine Services. Both of these proposals were scored on following criteria, which is experience and quals, their financial offer, proposed operational approach, as well as their diversity plan. Remember, this is revenue contracts, so we're not paying them to be on site. They're actually paying us to be out there and manage the site. Based on the overall review and subsequent interviews, the selection committee unanimously deemed Dales Marine Service, LLC, to be the most suitable team to manage the marina operations at the site. Dales Marine Service has over 20 years of experience in marine service management, most of which has actually taken place on the Outer Harbor. The team proved to understand our current and future visions for the property, as well as the rest of our property on the Outer Harbor. Dales Marine Service ensured that they will continue to maintain current slip holder services, as well as continued enhancement with the organization and the cleanliness of that site. Dales Marine Service displayed a thoughtful, balanced, and economically viable approach for the marina operations with an emphasis on service needs for the slip holders. ECHDC and Dales will enter into an agreement whereby ECHDC would receive a yearly base rent of revenue from the contractor, which will be tasked with all operational aspects associated with that management. The term of the contract will be 2 years. At the end of those 2 years, ECHDC would have the into additional maximum of 2 one-year extensions. Staff has determined that the requested authorization to enter into this agreement with the marina operator constitutes a Type 2 action as defined by the New York State Seeker Act and the implementing regulations for the New York State DEC. No further environmental review is required in connection with this. So the directors are requested to, 1, make a determination of responsibility with respect to the proposed contractor, and 2, to authorize the corporation to enter into an agreement with the contractor on the terms contained in these materials, and 3, to take all related action.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments?
In item 6, there's participation in SDDOB goals. If we're not allocating any funds directly to them and they're paying us back, how is that going to be monitored?
Right, so we're actually asking them to enter this contract in the state system to track anything when we'll just monitor against our typical goal of 30% for MW and the 3% SDOV on any of the expenses that they have on the site. Okay. So they're not required to meet those goals, but we are going to be tracking their expenses against the standard goals.
Okay, Michael?
I'm going to blame this on long years as an editor, but in the operator selection process, about halfway down the pre-submittal conference, it's either 8 or 6 different potential vendors, but not both.
You're going to stump me with the 8 or the 6. I'm going to go with 6 because I don't believe we had 8 at that pre-submittal conference. We'll check, I guess, to clarify, Mike, but thank you.
Damn, he reads it.
You know? Good catch. Welcome to
Any other questions or comments? Connie?
I have a question under scope of work, environmental operational requirements. Who will be checking up on this to make sure that they are following through?
Well, our staff will. Christine Cummins and both Chris Catanzaro will be working with them on this. We have a number of permits already in place for that property, and so we'll just continue to, with I think it's Army Corps as well on those.
Okay. So, the house.
Anything else? Anything from the... I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. That concludes the agenda portion. Anything else to come before the board?
No.
Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.